Hello pretty kitties, for today's video I'll be telling you my teacher from hell story. Now I would like to start this story off with a bit of a disclaimer. In school I wasn't the best student. Hell, I wasn't even the best kid growing up. But whereas others could say the same, I had a lot of undiagnosed mental health issues and had very unstable home environment that wasn't helpful. So you can probably imagine that as a kid I was a bit of a nightmare to handle for most teachers. But during elementary and some of middle school I got along with most of my teachers just fine. I had my disagreements here and there. And yeah, I got in trouble like most kids. But nothing really to write home about. The most trouble as a kid I can really think of that I personally caused was when I would shut down in class because I was either overwhelmed, upset about kid stuff, or was just having an off day. At that time the worst to happen was that my mother was called in to take me home. Over time I got put in what was called special needs classes and given an IEP. This was normal for kids like me back then. And it worked for most of my education. But middle school is when things started to go downhill. I started to be bullied. A lot. Sometime a little more than others. And that's not me exaggerating. You see, I am biracial. My mother is black and my dad is white. Now most of the time you really couldn't tell. I'm light-skinned, I can get tan from just being outside but don't get that dark unless I'm in direct sun for hours. I have very loose coil curls. Think around a 3A to a 3C4, those of you who know curl types. My nose is wider and my nostrils and have a lot of soft cartilage. Mostly typical POC features. Most of the time people think I'm Mexican or Puerto Rican. But no. Far as I know I don't have any Latin or Mexican in me. Now you're probably asking yourself, how does this tie into you getting bullied more than normal? Well, to be honest, it just mostly has to do with the area and time I grew up in. In the 90s and 2000s mixed kids weren't really people you would see a lot of where I grew up in. And sad to say we weren't the norm. To the point a lot of people fetishized us. And that sounds as creepy as it is. But it's messed up and still happens today. And for this it means that mixed kids, at least when I was growing up, we were either fawned over, criticized or judged harshly. Or at luckier times just ignored. And I was a preteen overweight nerdy girl from the 90s and early 2000s about to have these harsh realities smack me in the face. The first physical fight I got into was with a girl who kept laughing and saying I sounded like a man. And had been making fun of the way I dressed and looked. I had been dealing with acne and my body was having a lot of changes like most girls my age. But that day I had enough. I had enough of people laughing at me. I had enough of people pointing. I had enough of people whispering about me. I had enough of people touching my hair. I had enough of people calling me light bright. I had enough of people asking me who was the black one? My mother or father? Do you have indigenous backgrounds? Are you Mexican? Why don't you look like your mother? If your family is black, why don't you talk like it? If you're black, why don't you like rap? If you're black, why don't you act like it? I was done. That day I had made some wooden dolls for a history project. Nothing special but the kind you'd find at the dollar store and color them to dress them up. Just flimsy plywood. In my head I played it out. I would walk up to the girl laughing at me and smack her with the wooden doll. And I wouldn't stop. Fortunately it didn't go that way. I did hit her. But not in the violent way I did in my head. No, I got her once in the arm. And then someone pulled me away. The whole classroom erupted in hoots and hollers. The kids doing the classic fight chanting. But it wasn't much of a fight. From what I remember, she didn't get the chance to hit back. Nor did I hit her again like I wanted. No, lucky for both of us we were in the science class with a great teacher and students who rather not watch two preteen girls fight. I got dragged to the office. I was still in a rage. I wanted to hurt her. The way she had hurt me. I didn't even know her name. I didn't know why she had to make fun of me. I didn't care. All I knew was that she hurt me. And I wanted her to suffer. Even now thinking back to how I felt. The hate and pain that my middle school tormentors caused within myself burns so much. But I did eventually calm down. My mother was called to the school. But to my surprise, I wasn't in trouble. Not for starting a fight, not for interrupting class. Well, I was kinda in trouble. But I didn't really get punished. You see, I wasn't really the fighting or outburst kind of kid. I for the most part was quiet and for the most part well behaved. Yeah, I cried a lot, but it was because I was being bullied not only at school but at home. So it made me depressed. But my family had gotten fed up with me coming home from school whining about what someone at school had done or said to me. My family told me, either I stop crying and do something about it, or they would make me have deal with something worse. Something worse was usually me getting a ass whopping or my family making fun of me more. So I decided to choose violence. I figured, why run when I could join them? My logic was that if I hurt this girl enough they would leave me alone. I'd be just like the other girls. I'd be the crazy one, the one ready to fight. I wouldn't be that white bitch at locker 19B. I'd be the crazy mixed chick who smacked a girl so hard that she got expelled. Obviously it didn't go that way. Otherwise I'd probably be a different person. But even now, to my surprise, things back then went way different than I thought. The principal was confused to see me in his office. He never pictured me as someone to start a fight. And when I explained why, he and my mother weren't really surprised. Lucky for me, it was the day before winter break, so it was kinda pointless to suspend me. So I got to go home the rest of the day without a fuss. That break was peaceful. My family didn't yell at me. They didn't really bully me like normal. No, they praised me. They were happy I fought back. They joked, saying that now everyone knew I was crazy and shouldn't be messed with. And outwardly I was happy. I had finally gotten the approval from my family that I so desperately wanted. But inside I was still angry. Inside I was still hurting. I knew when we got back to school nothing would change. And for the most part it didn't. The girl had came back 2 days after me. She had gotten in trouble for skipping classes before our incident. So once we came back we both had to sit down and talk it out according to our counselor. All we did though was tell each other, "Hey, I'm depressed." "Me too." And we went our separate ways. But that was the start of my middle and high school nightmares. Things didn't get better. I was still bullied for all the same things. And even more at times. At home wasn't any better. We had been moving around so much that my grades started to show it. I got bullied at home for it. By the time I got to 9th grade I had almost entirely given up. This is where finally my teacher from hell comes in. Miss Polly. Miss Polly, when I first meet her, was an special needs teacher assistant at my school. She was there to help students with learning disabilities and those who had been falling behind in class. Now don't get me wrong. Miss Polly wasn't a horrible teacher. Nor do I think she was a horrible person. But screw Miss Polly. I don't like her, and if I ran into today I would tell her so. She didn't really help me as a student. And as a person she made a mockery out of me and my mother that day. You see, the reason I started this video out talking about my race and my first fight was because Miss Polly was one to quickly to judge someone based on looks and grades. Now this didn't make her a bad teacher. But personally I feel like it made her teachings biased and bigoted. At the time I had already given up on trying in class. I would half-ass a lot of the work to keep some pressure off me. But it wasn't doing much. So Miss Polly decided to make me her little project. She tried being overly helpful. She tried actually helping sometimes. And she tried getting down to my level at times. But it wasn't really helping. So she called my mother in for a parent-teacher conference. After one day of me not doing my work, my mother wasn't happy with me, rightfully so. And I knew I'd get in trouble at home later. So we had the meeting. Me and Miss Polly were in the school's library, wait for my mom to arrive. Miss Polly had been trying to get me to talk to her, but like in elementary school I still would just shut down when I was upset. I wouldn't talk to her. She tried asking me what my mother would have to say about how I was acting. Just then my mother walked in and asked what was going on. For some reason Miss Polly seemed to be taken back and needed to reevaluate how she was going to speak to my mother. But she did the typical teaching rundown of what was happening and what haven't been doing to pass my classes. And she finally got to the questions about if there was some way at home things could make school go better. My mother told her about the general stuff at home. That we has been moving a lot, so that wasn't helpful, but we could work on something. Which was all going fine, honestly. By the end of the meeting, my mother and Miss Polly were being pretty formal with each other. I hadn't really said much because I was still upset, and most of the time at these kinds of meetings kids doesn't really say much other than, "Sorry and I'll do better next time." But then Miss Polly said something to my mother that to this day still has me floored. "Miss Doodle, I thought Kitty was adopted. Or in foster care." My jaw dropped. My mother looked at me and asked, "Did I tell her that?" I interrupted and said no. I would never say that. And I really wouldn't. You see, even though I don't even talk to my family nowadays, I would never deny their existence or my relationship with them. My mother has had to deal with people thinking I wasn't her daughter since birth. And me being very lighter than her, people thought she adopted me or stole me and my sister. But no, far as I know, I'm not adopted. I've never been in the foster care system, thankfully. And I have never told anyone different. But after that the table was silent. And the meeting kinda just ended. My mother was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. Miss Polly, unknowing, have drove a rift that was already starting between me and my mother, but she had also brought race into that rift. On the drive home, I kept pleading with my mother that I would never say something like that. And that Miss Polly was wrong for doing that. But I don't know if my mother believed me. I failed 9th grade that year and had to repeat the year. I didn't get to graduate on time. I don't blame Miss Polly because of this. But what she said had big part to play, and it was the kicking off point of my truly horrible relationship with my family, my schooling, my self-worth, and how I would go on to know how the world saw me. Sorry to end the video on such a sad note. I promise. I have happier stories from school. As horrible as it was, I can think of a few good time I had. Like most of my art classes were fun. I even took a poetry class in 10th grade that made my writing way better. Kinda. And my senior year 1 graduated with straight A's. So yeah, school sucks. But as the saying goes, it'll make a great YouTube video in the future. Thank you so much to these Patreon supporters. You kitties rock.